So again, welcome everyone to the, the 10th session on mindfulness of thoughts. And I'm continuing the theme that Jason initiated last session on fear. I'm calling this one accepting your fear to be fearless. And that notion of opening to fear when it arises was also explored last week. So I just thought I'd delve into it a little more. Jason's exploration really opened a door for us to kind of explore mindfulness of thoughts and the arising of fear, how those interlink. So we're going to examine how fear, and you could actually include any mind state in this. You could replace any mind state with the word fear in the way that I'm diving into it. How it arises in the mind and the body, and what role thoughts play in this. And then we'll go on to look at how the narrative is just a collection of thoughts about what is seen keeps us trapped in a fearful state. It's really the narrative about what's happening that keeps us spinning and trapped in this fearful state, and how accepting it causes it to dissolve. For the most part, that process of accepting allows it to dissolve, because fear, and actually any mind state, and mindfulness of it can't coexist. Fear and the awareness of fear, that fear is present, they can't coexist. So really our primary job then becomes in this practice is to be aware of our inner state in each moment, no matter what is present. That's really all we do in this practice. It's so simple, yet it kind of goes against what we're taught and what our deeply ingrained patterns tell us we should do. So we tend to forget this kind of primary instruction. So just to review a little bit, this has been said already, that fear is not bad. In fact, fear is, in terms of survival, is very useful, right? You've got all the F words: fight, flight, freeze, and the other ones that have come up in more recent discussions. So we need those, right? If you step off the curb and there's a car speeding towards you, you want that fear reaction to kick in so that you jump back onto the curb and you survive, right? You don't want to just kind of, well, I'm enlightened and I've overcome fear, and now I'll just continue to walk out in front of this car. Enlightenment wouldn't have much use if that's where we ended up. So fear is useful. When danger is present, fear is useful. But fear can become a problem if it's hyper aroused, or if it's being triggered when there is no danger. And that's a state that many people on this planet live in, where they're just and it's a lot of it's social situations. It's no longer being faced with a tiger. It's fear of what people think of us in a social situation, or something we said. And it's just a lot of this kind of mostly it's these kind of relationship fears that are coming up. So it can become debilitating for many, because it's just constantly being aroused, and they're perceived threats rather than real threats. There's no actual threat to the person, for the most part. So you can call this kind of a state of hyperarousal of the fear-based system. And I won't go into all the sort of stuff that happens, when the fear-based system's triggered. Just happens. It's a cascade in the body, and just nothing you're doing. It's just something that is very automatic. So giving you that kind of background, so we're not getting rid of fear here, right? We're not saying fear is bad. Fear is useful, helps us survive, but about 95% of it is not useful and is harmful in many ways and causes suffering. So we really want to talk about that 95% that is unnecessary, you could say. So everybody knows I like slogans. We spent years ago, we spent quite a bit of time on the Lojong slogans, which was a lot of fun. So I really like the collection of slogans, but I have some of my own favorites, and these kind of apply to the whole area of fear, I think. And one is, everything is workable. Everything is workable. And fear is one of those where you kind of, okay, everything, including fear, it's workable. It's just a thought, it's not me. A lot of these fears have a lot of narrative. Most of them have a lot of narrative underlying them. So it's helpful to have that slogan. And pain is inevitable and suffering is optional. So it's kind of like, fear is inevitable. You're going to have fear is going to arise, but all the extra stuff that we add to it with our narratives is entirely optional. And if with awareness and mindfulness, we can cause it to not to move on to that, or if it has already, not to survive. So the former is, the first one is how you relate and understand fear, and the latter relate to how you kind of handle it. So you're relating to fear, as they say, and not from fear, if that makes sense to people. So it's helpful to practice this when fear is present. I'm not going to. I have done this in the past, but I'm not going to do this and ask you to sort of bring to mind a fearful situation. But if that feels appropriate, you might want to think of something that causes fear to arise in you, and then sort of play with that as we go through the talk. Really zero in on the fear. So we can think of a situation that might cause fear to arise in you. As you know, I just went on a hike, the Skyline Trail in Jasper. My son and Justin and his fiancée Stephanie took Vida, my wife and I, and Stephanie's parents on this, so the six of us on this hike. So there were some instances of fear arising. So I could actually bring that situation to mind. We had to walk across some ice that if you basically slipped, you'd slide down 100 feet of ice into a pile of rock, which would probably end very badly. So of course, very rightfully, some fear arose, which was pumping all of a sudden, because we just climbed, I don't know how many meters. It was the hardest part of the whole hike, and it ends going over this icy, snowy bit. So you're already exhausted. So the fear, actually, I could feel the energy, like the adrenaline and all the blood leaving my stomach and going to my extremities to just prepare me for something that was difficult. So it's an example of a situation that I could bring to mind and play with this. And of course, the fear was useful, right, in that moment. But what didn't happen, but could have happened, would a narrative could have arisen. I could have stared at it and said, "Oh wow, if I slip just a little, I could die. This is not good." But I can't turn back because I'm over halfway. So, and the group is going, what am I, oh my God, I should never have come. What am I doing here? My first backpacking trip and I'm going to die. And Justin's going to have it on film. this could have all been, going through my mind. But of course, that didn't arise. What arose was just to put one foot after the other and not look down. That's how I was going across. Like that was Justin's very wise, actual instruction to everybody. Just before, he didn't build it up at all. He just said, just put one foot in front of the other and don't look down. But that was didn't say, you could slip and die. It's just the instruction of how to get through it. So just when fear arises, we feel very separate, right? I mean, we talk about the illusion of separation. When fear is present, we feel very, we're cut off from our true nature, from the love and wisdom that is our essential nature. And we feel very separate in those moments. We get very small and narrowly focused in those moments. We can't wake up when we're in fear in this way. So really, you could say it's kind of the fuel of the ego mind. So when fear arises, when you see it, so the situation, can you be grateful for what's arising in that moment? I've said this before, and it can be a difficult practice to be grateful for whatever arises in the moment. So it's all opportunities to practice. And if you can't be grateful, then can you at least just allow it to be? Because it's already there, right? So you might as well. It's already present, right? So you might as well allow it to be. Because the other thing you can do is proliferate on it and start a narrative going. Really, you only two things occur. You either accept it and allow whatever is present to be, or you jump into a narrative about how this is going to be a catastrophe or some kind of proliferating narrative. So if you could do this very simple thing, would remove 95% of the suffering, 95% of unhappiness, 95% of states of fearfulness. You're never going to remove all the situations that can cause fear. You're never going to remove all the situations and circumstances that can cause difficulties. But by simply being present for them and not proliferating with narratives, you can remove 95% of all that optional suffering. The Buddha called dukkha. You'd be removing what the Buddha called dukkha. So the core of the practice, this is, if you can rock this in some way tonight, it has a profoundly powerful impact on your life. It's really what the word freedom is about. So the core of the practice is not to internally resist the moment, even if it's fear. It's the core of the practice. And inevitably, and perhaps often, you might forget that core practice. Right? I mean, you've all heard this before, right? But we forget. In particular, in moments of fear, we can be very likely to forget that this is the core practice. But that's okay, because the moment you've forgotten, the moment you realize that you've forgotten, the experience of suffering that arises because you forgot, that can be accepted. And that dissolves. You get me? So even if you forget and you realize, oh wow, I forgot, and look at and then you see the experience of suffering due to the fact that you forgot. That accepting of that moment causes the dukkha to dissolve. So it can be any moment. You can forget often. This is what the Four Noble Truths are really talking about, seeing the causes of suffering, the arising of suffering, and the cessation of suffering. It's just by bringing mindfulness, bringing awareness to the present moment. You can feel the suffering, unhappiness, fearfulness. You can feel it arising, and you can ask, where does this come from? Oh, I forgot to accept my experience in the moment. And look what happened. More suffering. But I can accept this. I can allow this. And the strange thing that happens is when you when you allow and open to the fear, once you accept it, it can't survive very long. It just can't survive. As I said, fear and the awareness of fear cannot coexist. The moment you open to the fear, and I'm talking here about that extra elaborative fear, not the fight, flight, freeze. That's an automatic biological response, which is quite useful, as I said. Talking more about this extra elaborative, pancha-based, narrative-based, thought-based fear. They can't coexist. It's just a simple matter of bringing awareness to it. It's mysterious, eh? It's kind of weird, actually, that the fear can't survive under the umbrella of mindfulness or awareness. Yeah. So fear can't survive very long with acceptance. Even the experience of suffering from not accepting the fear can't survive very long. No matter how many times you forget, the moment you remember and bring awareness to the suffering that's to whatever's present in that moment, the fearfulness, the unhappiness, whatever the mind state is, dissolves, and you can really kind of see it. I went through a phase in my practice where I was trying to figure out what this phenomenon actually was. Like, what is the mechanism? And I think Rick Hansen and folks like that have have had something to say about how the brain works and why this occurs, but again, it doesn't matter to me anymore. It's just it was fun for the mind to maybe play with those ideas, but it really doesn't matter why it happens. It's just you'll see that it happens. That these difficult mind states and awareness of them cannot coexist, cannot survive. So there's an acceptance of fear, and that presupposes awareness, right? When we use that word acceptance, it presupposes that there's awareness that that knows that you are in a state of fear. Acceptance is really, people sometimes have a hard time with that word, but it's really just saying you're aware and know that a state is present. That moment the moment you are aware, mindful of it, or whatever word we use, there's acceptance. Now, some people can be really identified, right, with their all kinds of mind states. And one of them can be fear. There can be a narrative, right? Meaning that a narrative that causes people to indulge in their fears, really develop an identity and solidify around fear. So the narrative could be about something that hasn't happened yet. It could be fear could be about something someone said to you, causes fear to arise. Could be about something that's happening in the moment that could cause elaborative fear to arise. And so the narratives about the fear that cause this optional suffering, if they're believed, will cause more fear to arise. In fact, what happens then is you have emotions that arise from the thoughts, right? The body reacts to things that happen in the environment, right? But the body reacts in the same way to the narrative of the mind. The body doesn't know that it's not real. The body will react to the unreal thoughts as much as it'll react to things that are actually happening in the environment. So you can get all these emotions that arise. The body thinks what the narrative in the mind is real and true, and can't tell the difference between something that's actually happening and something that is happening only in the mind. So of course you get the body reacts with an emotion when you have these narratives in the mind. I've gone through bouts of insomnia in my life, and I would lie in bed and the mind would create a narrative. And it would be, often fearful narratives, lots of worry, something I said, something I didn't say, something I should have or I shouldn't have, and so on and so forth. And be lying in bed trying to fall asleep, and of course the narrative's going on, the body's reacting with emotion, right? Fear and heartbeat, like physical emotion, bodily reactions. And here I am, I'm lying on an expensive mattress with a down duvet and a puffy pillow, and just silence and stillness in the room. maybe a bird or two chirping in the background. And my body's in a state of fearfulness and stress, simply because there's some narrative floating in the mind. It's the body's taking it as to be true and real. And of course, sleep is difficult when that is not seen for what it is. So now these narratives can still arise for some reason when I lie down in bed. But what I do is I kind of just watch, I close my eyes and I just watch it. I kind of come to a stage where, oh, this is going to be one of those nights where the mind's going to do its thing. Oh, I get to watch this weird kind of spontaneous show of the thinking mind. And of course, just bring awareness to it. What happens, right? Dissolves, can't coexist. You don't get to really enjoy the show for very long, if there's such a thing as enjoying that kind of a show. But yeah, as you get further into this practice, that actually happens. Yeah, it's all a grand display. So the practice is to be aware of the thoughts that are feeding the fear. As long as you're not aware of the thoughts that are feeding the fear, you are the thoughts, and your body is reacting to those thoughts. So just being aware, no matter what arises in life, including fear, to realize what the most important thing is to be aware of what's present, no matter what it is. So whatever arises is used for practice. Grist for the mill for your practice, an opportunity to practice. So when fear arose on that hiking trip, it was just an opportunity to practice, to see what might happen next. And over time, with this kind of acceptance, and as I said, even if you forget, this is crucially important. I'll say it again, because people say, "Oh yeah, I hear what you're saying, Steve," but then I forget. It does not matter if you forget. You can then be aware of the suffering resulting from the forgetting, and then that'll dissolve. And even if you forget to remember to you know what I mean, the second stage, you can then remember the next stage. No matter sort of how deep down the rabbit hole you go, you can still bring awareness or mindfulness into a moment that will cause it to dissolve. But the further you go down the rabbit hole, there may be some reverberating effects, right? It may take more time to come back to equilibrium. The more time you kind of spend proliferating. But over time, your inner state is no longer dependent on what's happening in the world. That's what freedom is. You're free from the burden of this reacting to what's happening in the world. Your inner state can be one of equanimity, peace, happiness, regardless of what's happening in the outer world. And this is really what we're talking about when we talk about awakening. And you're letting go of so much of those deep-seated patterns. There's another aspect of fear that I'm not going to talk about tonight, but that is also maybe crucial to mention, and that is as the egoic self, and the egoic self is simply survive. The egoic self isn't an entity, right? It's a collection of activities or processes that we call the self, the egoic self, egoic mind. I give it all kinds of different names. That requires fear and seeking, requires struggle in order to survive. I've said that many times, right? And as that starts to dissipate, or but I'll put it more precisely, as you transcend that self more and more, there is another kind of fear that arises, and this is what I often call dharmic fear. It's not like, this is probably a really bad term because it's not fear of the Dharma or anything, but it's kind of fear, it's the self, which is just processes, almost kind of reasserting itself, like, okay, I didn't know that this practice meant the death of me, meaning the little me, the egoic self. And it's clear that this is what it means. And so there's these kind of fears, the dark night of the soul, the different words or phrases given to it, where there's a real sense of fear that comes about as a deeper consciousness emerges and that egoic self is transcended. The self feels threatened, and all kinds of imagined fears can arise, and this can be a very difficult point in someone's and people's practice, and it can really delay the emergence of the deeper dimension of consciousness. So that's another aspect of how fear can arise in later phases of these kind of this process of awakening, if you want to call it that. We can discuss that at a later date, but it is important to discuss because a lot of people actually leave the practice at that very crucial moment because the fear can be so intense and tricky. And very tricky. Yeah. Okay, I'll open it up for any. I've thrown a lot of stuff out there for people to chew on and see what I'm curious to see what landed with folks. I'll open it up for any comments. Oh, by the way, if you want to see a really cool video on YouTube, go to my son's YouTube channel is Justin Outdoors, and it should be near the top, and it's entitled Ken Boomer's Hike, and it's actually quite funny. He shoots it and does it all. He produces and everything on it. And he interviews Vida and I a fair bit in this video about our very first backpacking hiking experience, but totally unrelated to this thing. But if you're looking for some light entertainment and you enjoy beautiful scenery, then check that out. And you'll actually see the ice thing that I'm referring to. But yeah, the Skyline Trail is spectacular. Justin says it's one of the best hikes in the world in terms of how did he put it? Views to effort, the equation, scenic views to effort. It's one of the best most rewarding. Anyway, any comments or questions? I said a lot, yeah. Maureen, yeah.
Yes, just this brought up the situation. A family member suffers from obsessive compulsive disorder, And that seems to be the extreme of what we're talking about, where it isn't easy for him not to react from fear. I don't know what I want to say about it, but just that it seems to tie in so well. I'm thinking that meditation practice would be helpful, but then on the other hand, perhaps very difficult for someone who suffers from that condition. Just a lot of, when we were talking about this, a lot of thoughts arose of situations with this family member, and where the fear really drove the behavior, and it was hard. It's hard for him to get off that treadmill and look at it in a different way.
Mm. Yeah, I don't have much to say to that. I mean, in terms of meditation practice and mindfulness practice with people that have the DSM disorders, all the various ones that are based on anxiety and fear. I've had some cases where people have related to the fear arising in new ways, but in a lot of cases it takes a lot more than an 8-week mindfulness course. It needs really to be done in conjunction with a lot of individual work, because so many cases are so individual. But it's just finding what the triggers are, and then slowly inviting the person to open to what arises when those triggers arise. And I always like to start with small and easy fears that are doable, if that's the word. So don't start with, like, I had a guy with social anxiety, he couldn't enter a room, so I didn't start with let's run into a room and it was more like little things, like he said, well, I get afraid when a spider, but it wasn't a big, I just asked him for little fears, and he mentioned a few. I said, well, practice with the little fears, and he got kind of used to what it meant to open to a fear, because it's impossible to open to these big ones when people are suffering that much. So just kind of starting with small, and I recommend everybody to do that if you're having difficulty actually opening to and allowing fear. Start with some little ones, like the meditation was really, I started with our constant body moving, because we're all mostly on is a fear of discomfort, right? So just bringing a bit of awareness to this fear of discomfort. And there's so many little fears that arise moment to moment that cause us to move toward and away from the world, so much as these little fears. So that's all I guess I would say is maybe start with smaller ones and combine it with some real individual work with somebody that knows this stuff in relation to mindfulness.
I thanks, Stephen. That was really a good talk. Thank you very much, and it's really great to see everyone. Always it is. Firstly, I just wanted to speak to Maureen's topic, because I've struggled with severe OCD myself. The best thing I could describe it's like your brain. It's like if your brain's like the smoke alarm, but it's like cranked up, like to be like 100 times more sensitive. So, and your thoughts can really get out of control. At least that was my experience. And the mainstay of classical treatment is like basically it's response prevention therapy. So it's like they want to stop you from responding to your obsessive thoughts. But I think if it's really severe, it's like the smoke alarm is so sensitive and the system's so tight that that's just too fearful. There's so much, even just participating that is like almost impossible. So I think a mindfulness practice and really starting off, like I started off guided meditations. It helped a lot, and I did a lot of reading, and I found this book. I'll put the title, but this book is by this guy, Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz. I've read many books, but this one was the best by far. And it's called Free Yourself from Obsessive Compulsive Behavior. And he combines mindfulness. He's has a very, very compassionate approach. You know, a lot of the other books tend to say, oh, just do response prevention therapy and you should be fine. But I think for someone that is really severe, it's almost like not an option. You can't even go there. So I think mindfulness helps a lot. And yeah, having also seen someone that specializes in treating it, and you have to find someone that you feel very comfortable and safe with. So it's really, because it is really, really challenging, extremely challenging. It's a lot of suffering. But yeah, this book, excellent, short, simple. I got a lot from that book. And I'll put it in the chat after. I just wanted to say my own comments about noticing fear in my practice. And this is like a really surprising experience that I've noticed, even in the last few weeks. I just felt this kind of inclination to sit. I wanted to sit longer than I normally would. Do these longer sits, like an hour and a half, or and it wasn't. It just I just wanted to do. It just felt like that's kind of naturally what I should do. So I've been doing that, and I noticed that there's there's been this dropping away of just this really, really subtle fear that's been with my meditation practice. This fear of am I really doing the right thing with my time? It's it was subtle there, and now that it's gone, it just kind of disappeared for some reason. I guess maybe just a natural consequence of the practice, but who knows? But it's interesting to see that sometimes, for me, that fear not being there now, at least for the time being, the absence of the fear is what caused me to notice that I was kind of holding that subtle fear for so long. So, and yeah, this is kind of an interesting one for me. Yeah, I'm just going to keep working with the fear and see. I feel like the subtle fear can be so subtle, you don't even realize it's there. And yeah, it's really a tricky thing. And yeah, that's really all I want to say. I feel like I'm at this point where it's there's the subtleties in that there's it's a subtle aversion to that fear, that unless you're really, really paying attention closely to your whole experience, that it's I was missing it. It's that subtle aversion that can be there to the fear. And then once I was able to acknowledge that there's this subtle, very subtle aversion, then that fear kind of just passed. So anyways, that's the subtle aversion. I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Yeah. I think I heard you say in the middle there, with your long meditations, that there was a fear if you were doing the right thing or wasting your time. or something like that. And that, to me, really points to, well, one of the 5 hindrances, right, that you brought up last session, and that is doubt. Right, and as the Buddha said, that's the last of the hindrances to dissolve. It's you to accept, right? Because really, the hindrances, it's all about accepting what's arising, and so the doubt is a hard one, right? And it can be very subtle. This doubt about the practice. So you can accept monkey mind, you can accept sleepy mind, you can accept the desiring mind, and accept the mind that's not wanting something, which are the other 4 hindrances. But accepting that the kind of little subtle doubts about whether the practice is doing anything, or is spending too much time. Just they can be very, very subtle and hard to notice, as you said, and accepting those is really kind of the finale of the hindrances in many ways. Yeah. Are people familiar with the 5 hindrances? I know Jason mentioned them last week and said something. I know some of you are for sure, but we could do a talk on those as well. They're kind of fundamental teachings. I have a little bit of a different spin on them, is not in terms of, the Buddha talked about them a lot in terms of anecdotes, which I kind of know what he was getting at. I think maybe what he said was interpreted in different ways, because it comes off as a real ring of getting rid of. And really what I think, as I read deeper into the translations, he was really talking about accepting. The antidote to the hindrances is to allow and open to them and not try to get rid of them. Yeah. Right, because you try to get rid of something, what happens? It just proliferates, right? It compounds. So yeah, we can have a talk on that, because because I know a lot of, some of the monastics teach the antidote approach to the hindrances, which can actually get in the way. You can waste a lot of time trying to find an antidote to busy mind. Can you imagine how long you can suffer with that one? Trying to get rid of busy mind, doing all these techniques. So you realize none of this is going to work. I can count breaths till the cows come home. I can, short of heavy drugs, the only thing you can do is accept it. Right? The busy mind is going to happen. I went through the drug phase too, many, many years ago, where I thought I could, self-medicate with recreational drugs, but discovered that didn't work, and found spirituality worked much, much better. Om saying, how about fear of failure to meet many commitments one makes during the psychological life pattern? Hi, Om. Yeah. Yeah. So meeting commitments, you brought this up, I think, last week as well. The societal expectations, and I think you asked if it was the ego, perhaps, that had these, that was at the forefront of meeting these societal expectations. So I think in some ways you answered the question yourself. You create these expectations are created in the mind as expectations that you have to meet. I guess you use the word commitments here, but it's how can I put this? It's the egoic's mind version of what is expected more than what might be appropriate to live. And I think maybe for perhaps calling on the deeper wisdom. I did a talk on natural, I forget what I call it, natural intelligence. I can't remember the title, but I can dig it up home, and if you might have been here for it, but even if you were to kind of watch it again, and there we have this inherent natural intelligence to discern what is appropriate, what is wise, what is wise action in our lives. And many times that's got nothing to do with societal expectations or egoic expectations of the egoic mind. So I throw that out there as another way to kind of come at this. Because society throws all kinds of ghastly expectations at us that have nothing to do with our inherent nature or even wise action in the world. And you've seen them over history, how they kind of fall by the wayside, right? Some of these societal expectations, and we realize that they're just constructs with no real meaning. And then, so they just dissolve from society even. So it's yeah. I invite you to look up that talk, and if you can't find it, let me know, and I'll dig it out, because I think that might be helpful in this case. Well,
Stephen, I got a bit confused when you said earlier today that the body cannot tell the difference between reality and thought. I thought that the body was this hidden intelligence, that this intuition that you just talked about now, that will help us tell the difference. So look deeply in the body, look at your reactions, and your body will tell you. So now I'm all mixed up.
yeah, I can understand why. There's two aspects here we're talking about. So one is the body reacting to the mind, right? So the thoughts are unreal, right? It's not actually happening. It's a virtual reality. Body reacts to it. We all get that sense, right? Like you get the sense where you can be thinking about something, and before you know it, you're having an emotion. And if you accept that's what's just happened, you can watch the whole house of cards collapse, dissolve. So I think we've all experienced that, and we've probably maybe less so experienced the body as a base of intelligence, which is another side to it. The body is kind of an early warning system, or kind of having a natural intelligence to it. So now the mind can listen to the body. So the mind and body are very connected, right? They're never separate. But it can flow both ways. So one way, it's the body responding to a virtual reality. The other way is we can tune into the signals that the body's always sending, but mostly go ignored, because we're not a people that spends a lot of time tuning into what's happening in their body. We're much more taught to tune into what's happening in our minds, right? And by tuning, I had taught a bunch of managers how to increase their emotional intelligence. And all I told them was to tune into your body. And all we did was body scans. And why are we doing all these body scans? I go, well, you find it annoying? And they go, yeah, it's fucking annoying. I said, well, then keep doing it. Like, you're obviously not in tune with your body, right? So I kept giving these body scans, but we're not. We're just not in tune. We're not listening to the signals our body are sending. There's an old psychological experiment where they had a card game, and they had blue cards and red cards, and people were supposed to turn over different cards. I don't remember all the details of the game, but basically you could tell if you were winning or it took you a while to figure out with your mind which card to turn over in order to win the game, right? And if they say like, and they put lie detector equipment on everybody's bodies. And what was happening is the body would react when they reached for the wrong card, and they could detect it on the sensitive lie detector equipment, this stress reaction, right? So the body knew like way before they figured it out cognitively. And the people even reported a gut instinct for the cards way before their mind figured it out. So it kind of went in 3 phases, right? The body knew, then the gut knew, and then the mind knew, and kind of in that order, which cards caused the losing of this game. So it's, can we tune into the body at that level, being very tuned into what's happening in the body. I experienced this when I had headache, concussion, pain. I had to tune in to very precisely into the early warning signals that the body was sending. And if I tuned into that, I could avoid a lot of suffering, a lot of headaches, in other words. But if I didn't, if I missed it, it would cascade up into some significant physical pain. So yeah, it works both ways, Manuel. So thanks for asking that question, because you can have it goes both ways. It's totally connected. So of course they listen to each other. I think the benefit comes from us spending a little more time listening to the body, or a lot more time. So yoga, people are practicing yoga, mindful walking, all these body-based practices are very helpful to us in the Dharma and in mindfulness. So it's great to see everyone. I'm a little tired tonight. I don't know if you noticed, we have a puppy in the house. If you ever think of getting a puppy, be prepared. Oh, gee, it's like a full-time job. It's our son's dog, and when they're coming to visit on Sunday, and they're taking it home with them. But I've had it for a week and a half at that point. It feels like 2 months. Like I would sit here and talk to you guys till 10 o'clock tonight, just so I don't have to take my turn upstairs with the puppy. He's adorable, of course. Yeah.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
You can have another minute away from the puppy.
Okay, thanks.
When Manuel was talking about this idea that our body gets triggered by, you were saying 95% of our fears are created in our mind. It's not actually real fears. But there's, you still by paying attention to it doesn't matter if it's a true fear or not a true fear. Paying attention to the body, you can't really go wrong with that. It's like, it reminds me of that quote, and I don't know who did it, but it's like, the fool who persists in his folly shall become wise. So even if that reminds me of that. So even if this isn't really something that's triggered by a real fear, you're still gonna get it's such a powerful source for insight.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Jason. Yeah, right on. Yeah. Okay, everyone. Time to take my turn upstairs. And again, it's great to see you all and be well. Take care. Next week.
Thank you.
Happy shift.
Thanks, Stephen.
Good to see everybody. Thanks so much, Stephen.
Good night.
Bye, guys.
Even if you could send that book or reference, please.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Yeah.
Night, everybody.
Right. I think Jason's gone there. I don't know I'll try and get the book reference to you. I'll email Jason.
Thanks very much.
Take care. Night.